Everyone, thank you for waiting. I think more people are coming online, but I think we should get going. Again, thank you again for joining today's webinar. My name is Rafael. I'm membership manager at Bonsucro. Work a lot with our companies and members in Europe and the US, and I think many of you are here today, so thank you again for joining. We'll be talking about the launch of the Bonsucro production standard, the revised Bonsucro production standard. We're very proud about it. It's very exciting. I think the standard is positioning Bonsucro to the future and really putting us as a community in a leadership position in many areas. So we're going to be talking about the process, the governance, the details around the standard. Important to note, today is not a technical training, so we will not be going into indicator by indicator. We will be organizing technical trainings in March. But today is just to give you a bit of flavor about the key changes, the key topics, how the process was conducted by Bonsucro, and to give you a chance to ask questions. So I'll share my screen with you. Now I'll turn off my camera and share the screen. So hopefully everyone will be able to see the slides. There we go. Before we start, just a few housekeeping rules. So for you to note, this session is being recorded. All the slides and recording will be circulated after the call. For any questions that you have, please use the Q&A function of Zoom. So this should be at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on the version of Zoom you use. But it's a Q&A function, so you can write down your question and we will answer the questions at the end. If we, by any chance, because of time, do not get to your question, we will answer it afterwards via email. So yeah, please do use the Q&A as we go, and we will try to cover the questions at the very end. The agenda for today, so we have a quick introduction. We'll talk about the standard revision process and the objectives. We'll talk about the new documents that were developed alongside the new standard, the key changes that were introduced, the next steps in terms of implementation, so all covering the transition period to the new production standard, and then finally the Q&A at the end. So to start, what is Bonsucro? Most of you know Bonsucro is the leading global sustainability platform and standard for sugarcane, and we have a purpose to collectively accelerate the sustainable production and uses of sugarcane globally. As you know, sugarcane is a very important crop, is the biggest crop by biomass on Earth, and it is a source of income and employment to hundreds of millions of people in many countries, over 100 countries throughout the globe. So it is quite a critical commodity, and is also a commodity that has an important impact in terms of social, environment, economic. So there are many challenges, many opportunities, and that's why Bonsucro exists. We focus on improving and accelerating sustainable production of sugarcane. So our platform is built around 3 global standards. The one that we're going to be covering today is the production standard. That's the main standard that applies to the farms growing sugarcane and the mills. It is a metric in its nature, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We have a production standard for smallholder farmers. That's for, let's say, a slightly simplified version that enables farmers with less than 25 hectares of land to collect data and assess their sustainability. And then finally, we have a chain of custody standard, which is an accounting framework for the trade of Bonsucro certified material. And that material can be, of course, sugar, ethanol, bagasse, molasses, anything that comes from sugarcane, and very recently, biomaterials like bioplastics, fibers, textiles, etc. Anything from sugarcane can be Bonsucro certified. Now, as I mentioned, the production standard is very metric in its nature. So it's a measuring tool, it's science-based, and it really enables the farms and the mills to benchmark their performance against the standard and against their peers. So it's really a learning tool. And I think with this revision, one of the key messages that we want to share with you is that this remains. So it remains a science-based standard, metric in nature, enabling learning and improvement, but at the same time, it has been strengthened to include, sorry, more of a risk management view to it. So we have introduced the concept of management systems throughout the standard to enable continuous improvement for the certified producer. So we kept the nature of the standard as a metric learning tool, but also expanded to include more due diligence, more risk assessment, and more identification of continuous improvement opportunities. Because the standard is metric-based, we have a very clear view of the benefits and the impacts that the implementation is having. So we can see consistent reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, for example. We see that workers in certified operations earn more than minimum wage of where they operate. We see a lot of positive results around input usage, for example, fertilizer application, and the numbers are growing. So we see more and more new members, more certified mills, a larger area being certified, and of course, higher productions as well. Some of the key achievements of Bonsucro with this past version of the standard. So we now are a global community of more than 280 members in 50 countries. Sales of certified products continue to increase each year. We actually just published our outcome report a few weeks ago, and this past period, we almost reached 2 million tons of certified sugar sold. So it's very encouraging. I think that our buyer community is also stepping up and honoring their commitments. We've reached over 10,000 smallholder farmers and a total of 39,000 hectares of land under that smallholder certification. We have safer workplaces with lower accident rates. Again, this all monitored and verified by the certification. We see reductions, as I mentioned, in greenhouse gas emissions, water use. Another important achievement in this period was the Adelante initiative. So Bonsucro partnered with several members, La Isla Network, and some mills in Nicaragua, the Ingenio San Antonio, to promote best practice on preventing heat stress on sugarcane workers on the field. And this has a very important impact in terms of health and safety, in terms of their livelihoods in general. And we're very proud of the work as well. So all the learnings from the Adelante initiative were considered for the standard revision as well, and some of them were incorporated as part of that. And finally, investment in innovative projects. Bonsucro has been increasingly part of innovative projects, either as a funder or a participant. And very soon we will be launching our Bonsucro Impact Fund, which is a fund built from credit trades that will enable more projects with farmers and mills around the key strategic areas of Bonsucro. We'd also like to say that we've reached critical mass. So we have right now about 27% of all the land growing sugarcane globally is either owned or operated by a Bonsucro member. And about 20% of the global purchasing of sugar is also part of Bonsucro. And here on your screen, you can see some of our most famous members in all different sectors. So you have rum, sugar, bioplastics, energy, and biofuels. So it's quite a broad spectrum of sectors as well. Finally, alignment with the Bonsucro strategy. So the standard was designed, and the working group that was working on the standard always bared in mind the strategic direction of Bonsucro for the next 5 years. We have the goal to collectively accelerate production and uses of sugarcane, and within that, the 3 pillars of sustainability, so improving environmental impacts of sugarcane, strengthening human rights and decent work in sugarcane farming and milling, and creating value across the supply chain. So those are really directions that we committed to take as an organization, and that the standard will contribute towards the achievement. A little bit about the reasons for changing the standard. That's a question that people ask. So firstly, as I mentioned, because of the learnings that we had in the past from using the standard, the Bonsucro calculator, the audits, we can then build up the quality of the standard. So we correct what can be improved. We adjust indicators to be more relevant for producers and to create more value to those that are using the certification system. So that's one of the key components, is really enhancing the standard so that it creates more value to the users, at the same time that is increasing credibility and advancing Bonsucro as a leader in the sugarcane sector. The second point is around continuous improvement. So we are an ICO code compliant member. For those of you who don't know ICO is a standard setting organization for standard setting organizations. So we get audited by ICO against their codes. And one of the codes of ICO is around standard setting processes. So ICO requires that Bonsucro carries out a review of its global standards at least every 5 years. So that's compulsory and we have to do it. So there's also that credibility governance component to the reasons for change. And then finally, and importantly, responding to present and future challenges. We live in a world that is constantly changing. I think with COVID, we've seen that. We've seen how things can change very fast and how different issues arise. And they have to be addressed. So I think adapting the standard to be able to reflect and to respond to emerging issues is very important. And I think that's what the working group did. Now, regarding the governance for the process, so initiated with the Technical Advisory Board. That's an independent technical board of Bonsucro that set the terms of reference for the standard revision. And then there is involvement of the Members' Council. So the Members' Council also had participants in the working group. And then it goes through several different steps, which we're going to describe until it is approved by the board of directors. The general objectives, as I mentioned, were based around the issues with implementation. So it's ensuring that the current standard or issues with the current standards were identified and then corrected in the new version. It also covered new thematics, which we're going to talk about, and also looking at, as I mentioned before, aligning the standards to better management systems. So that was also part of the review. The working group that conducted the review was composed of 20 individuals, all of them experts and independent. They were appointed by the Technical Advisory Board, and they represent a different array of stakeholders, different geographies as well. So we have representatives, for example, from Australia, from Brazil, Colombia, South Africa, and also with very different expertise areas. So agronomists, cane growing, harvest, deforestation and conservation experts, and human rights and social issues as well. They had many meetings throughout those past 2 years, many of them online, of course, because of COVID, but also some of them in person. So this is the timeline, so you can visualize the whole process. It started with a pre-consultation back in 2019, where we gathered feedback from stakeholders on priorities and key emerging issues and trends. We then had the publication of the first draft in 2020 with a round of public consultations. Then back to the working group for review based on the feedback, and then a second round of public consultation in 2021, that already including a draft of the guidance and the calculator. Important to note, during the public consultations, over 400 individuals contributed with comments and feedback. So that was very inclusive, and we really were very happy to see the level of participation that we got. We then moved into 2 pilot audits in Brazil and India, and this was really about testing the auditability, let's say, of the standard, ensuring that the auditors on the ground would be able to audit against the standard, and that everything was very clear and very well defined. And finally, then we had the final draft which was approved by the board. Of course, throughout this process, there was a lot of back and forth. So some of the versions were not approved, then it goes back to the working group. So throughout that process, and because of that back and forth, we can safely say that the standard is, first of all, consensual. So it's not a perfect standard, but it is a standard that is a good compromise across different views and different interests and different priorities. And also that because of that process, the standard is stronger. It covers more areas, the emerging issues that we talked about. And this is something that we're very proud of. And now between January and September 2022 is that what we are calling the transition period until the standard becomes compulsory, let's say, or enters into force. In terms of new documents that go alongside the standard, so I mentioned we have the production standard version 5.1 that was published in January. This is available on our website. It was published along with the implementation guidance. So the guidance document provides a lot more detail, indicator by indicator, in terms of implementation and how the indicator is measured or set. The implementation guidance is not auditable. So farmers and mills are audited against the production standard, not the guidance. That's a very important point. In February, we launched the Bonsucro calculator version 5. And then we will launch, sorry, we didn't launch yet, it's not February. And then the certification protocol version 6 that was published in December 2021. That's the document that sets the rules for auditing. So the parameters and processes that the auditors need to follow to audit against the Bonsucro standards, and a guidance for auditing as well. So that's for the auditors, how to address or assess each one of those indicators. And then finally, the HCV additional guidance, which will be published in February, which is covering specific guidance to the concept of high conservation value areas, which is an important component of the new standard. So in terms of the key changes, first of all, looking at the principles, we have reorganized and streamlined the principles. So you might recall that there were 6 principles before, now we have 5. So the 6th principle was the European Union Renewable Energy Directive principle for certified biofuel. And basically this principle was removed and a new standard was developed in separate for the European Union Renewable Energy Directive. So for those of you that are interested in biofuels in particular, the EU RED component of Bonsucro is now in a different standard, which was published in July 2021, also available on our website. Overall, the new standard includes 72 indicators in 20 criteria. Out of those 72, now we have 38 core indicators. So that's an increase in terms of core indicators, and 34 non-core indicators. To become certified, a farm or a mill, they need to comply with all of the core indicators and at least 60% of the 34 non-core indicators. So it still leaves room for continuous improvement in those areas that are not core, but it increased the core indicators. We'll cover some of the areas, but some of them very important, like no deforestation, for example. Of course, forced labor, child labor, everything around labor law and ILO conventions. So those remain, and then there were introductions of new core indicators around management systems as well. So objectives of the standard revision in terms of thematic areas, let's say. So the first one was to promote climate change resilience. We know that's a growing issue, and climate change needs to be addressed. So it's not only about mitigation and reducing emissions, that remains, but it's also about creating resilience and creating a management system and action plan around climate change. Improving working conditions and welfare is another very important component. Expand due diligence. So as I mentioned, we have now indicators around due diligence of the supply area. Some of those indicators might apply even outside the area of certification. So it's really strengthening the standard and credibility and expanding the risk assessment and management systems of those operations. This is very aligned to the trends we see in human rights with the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights, and new regulations that are coming online in Europe, in the US, and other areas that are requiring or introducing legal requirements around human rights due diligence. Develop management systems. As I mentioned, the metric nature, science-based nature of the standard remains, but also we want to develop more continuous improvement. And then streamlining the audit process, so ensuring that the audit is efficient and effective, and that it creates value to those that are being audited as well. So we're going to go into those topic areas a bit more detail. So in terms of promoting climate change resilience, so we continue to track greenhouse gas emissions through an improved methodology. And for those of you who know the Bonsucro calculator, you know how it works, but it basically has a complete breakdown of the emissions at the farm and mill level. So this remains. Under the criterion 3.2 of this new standard, we build on success of that GHG emission calculation methodology. And the idea is you're collecting the data, and now you can set not only achieve the minimum targets, let's say, that are set on the standard, but set your own path towards further reduction in line with the Paris Agreement on greenhouse gas emissions. So there are lots of other changes. So one of them was to capture environmental impacts more precisely. So there are changes to specific indicators, for example, around biodiversity, to capture in more clear terms that impact. So, for example, we have introduced the requirement to map the biodiversity and natural ecosystems across a supply base. So that's indicator 4.1.1, and then create a biodiversity management plan. That's indicator 4.1.2. Preventing deforestation, that's another very important one. So we continue to use the high conservation value reference and terminology, but also, and this was one of the points that was discussed a lot by stakeholders and the working group, was around the commitments to no deforestation. We know many of our members have commitments to no deforestation. So in that sense, we have strengthened our stance on deforestation with a new indicator that says that no land can be converted from natural ecosystems into farmland, no longer only sugarcane, but covering any other crop as well. And this is aligned to other frameworks around deforestation. So it's a very interesting indicator, and I think very, very strong one. We also improved the indicator around water efficiency, and this is aligned to our learnings, to using the new standard, and to the measures and changes that we've seen at certified farms and mills. In terms of working conditions and welfare, we have the priority, of course, of protect workers from harsh climatic conditions. I cited the example of the Adelante initiative and heat stress, so that's a very important point. Address the gender imbalance in the workplace. So the Bonsucro standard in general had already a no gender discrimination policy, but we know that sugarcane operations are still dominated by men, and for the first time we are directly addressing the gender imbalance with a new indicator requiring that at least 15% of the management and skill positions of an operation are appointed to women. We also continue to have the indicators around safeguard against abuse, or the no harassment indicator. So that's also very important from a gender lens. Then we have strengthening our position around living and working conditions by aligning to the International Labour Organization conventions. So, for example, where the mill provides accommodation to workers, it must meet minimum safety standards, and there are, of course, very specific criteria for that. In addition, the metrics have been updated to ensure that there is no child labor as well. So those indicators 2.3 and 2.3.4 are very important under the creation of safer living and working conditions. We also introduced mental health as a new component in the health and safety management plans of the mills. During COVID, and we've heard a lot about it, but during COVID, mental health became a very salient issue. And therefore, we want to ensure that this is considered by the health and management systems in certified mills. And then finally, we committed to tracking existing wages against a living wage metric, so that will help farmers and mills to complete this matrix around prevailing wages and then understand the gap between the prevailing wages and the living wage. And our commitment as Bonsucro at the strategy level is to promote living wage in sugarcane. So this is really the first step towards that objective. And we'll have more announcements around living wage very soon as well. But in the standard, that's how it was agreed. So the producers would calculate the prevailing wage using the Bonsucro calculator, and then have the numbers and the facts to be able to plan how to close the gap. The other area, as I mentioned, expanding due diligence, so mapping risks and opportunities for improvement, including beyond the units of certification, creating continuous improvement plans. As I mentioned, a lot of those management system approach that we are applying now to several different indicators enable continuous improvement. It has the objective as well of promoting collaboration and communication between employers and employees, so enabling that workers and worker organizations have a say and they are heard, and there are systems in place to address grievances, for example. So this is really important and part of this criteria on grievances and employer and employee relations. Also, demonstration of legal compliance. So now we have a new indicator, 1.3.1, where we're asking operators to develop systems to promote compliance with all applicable local, national, and ratified international laws. So it's no longer just a yes or no kind of I comply with the law or not, because we know in many cases this is a process, right? It's a continuum, and the idea is having a system to monitor legal compliance and to act when needed. I think that's really the concept behind this key change. As I mentioned, developing a management system approach. So this is one of the key changes, really looking into creating, promoting leadership, setting sustainability policies, implement good document management, and undertake monitoring and evaluation. So it's really about the process of how you try something, you learn from it, and then you improve, and you have the records, the numbers, and an understanding of how to improve things over time. So it's really about bringing continuous improvement to life. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the transition period. So what comes next? So as I said, today's session is the launch of the production standard. We have it online, so I really encourage you to have a look at the document if you can. The guidance as well is all on the Bonsucro website. You can download the document. If you have any questions, and or if you don't ask your questions today and you come across a question later, you can send an email to standards@bonsucro.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. We will be organizing full technical training from March. So this will be offered by Bonsucro. We will be reaching out to you and notifying the dates and when this is happening. Specialized training will be offered by training providers soon after that. So as soon as the training material is developed by Bonsucro, then the independent training providers will be able to offer training as well. And we are planning to have some regular live Q&A sessions over the next 12 months. Important to note as well that accredited certification bodies, so the auditors and licensed training providers, will be invited to take a requalification exam at a later stage. So basically, after that training model is developed, the auditors as well have to be retrained, and then they have to be requalified, and we will be reaching out to you on those as well. Some important dates in terms of this transition period. So audits against certification protocol will be compulsory from July 2022. Again, the certification protocol is the document that provides the rules for auditing. That's not the Bonsucro production standard. So basically, even audits against the current standard, the old standard, let's say, will be required to use the new certification protocol from July this year. Audits against the new production standard, version 5.1, are compulsory from September 2022. And we really encourage members to contact their certification body to discuss this transition plan. For some mills, it might be earlier, for some mills will be in September. So it's really about organizing that transition period, ensuring that the staff is trained, that everyone knows and understand those changes. And we are here as well to help, but just to keep in mind those very important dates in 2022. So right now we're going to open for questions. So hopefully you had a good overview of those key changes, the key emerging issues and topics that were addressed by the working group. Please do write your questions on the Q&A function, and we will answer them. For the questions as well, I would like to introduce Ruth Asensio. She's helping Bonsucro. She's working with us now at the implementation stage, but she was also part of the working group. So Ruth is a social expert, and she was part of the working group from the very start in 2019, and helped also with the technical developments of the standard. So thank you very much, Ruth, for joining us, and please do send your questions in.
Thank you. We'll wait to see your questions, if you can write them down in the Q&A. And let me see, there are some questions. Rafael, I'm going to read the first one. In the case of prior conservation of HCB areas, since the cutoff date, is there a protocol for remediation mitigation? Well, for this, as Rafael said, I'm going to answer this slide. For these are new guidances to follow. First, the identification of the HCB areas and how are they going to be attended by a biodiversity management plan. And yes, we are after this, we are considering a mitigation plan. This is going to be part of the next steps. So please wait for news from Bonsucro on this area. And let me see, there is another question. Well, here is, have you assessed if currently certified mills farms will drop out of Bonsucro certification versus this raised bar? Okay, that's a very interesting question. That was part of the answers that we tried to, or the part in the public consultations. So as we've been going forward this new standard, and we make these trials in Brazil and in India and in other mills, we found out that this is not that different, but it is improved, the same old standard, But for example, in the management plan that we used to have, we didn't address it correctly, some of the issues. So now we break it down in many other management plans for different areas. For example, we place the water stewardship goal, that it matters more for water issues. We have a pest control different. We have a management plan for soils, so we can address them better. So I don't think it's going to be a breakdown. It's an improvement, and I'm sure that most of the mills will find it that it's really familiar with what they are doing, the best practices in the farms and in the mills. So no, I don't think it's going to be a dropout. It's going to be a better way to show the compliances with sustainability.
Thank you, Ruth. Just to add to that, I think we have we're actually expecting an increase in certifications, really, because it is really important. I think the working group did a great job in managing those different interests, and I said the standard is a compromise, a very good result, and I think the working group had in mind always the value to the farms and mills as well as a key component to it. So it's not only about what you have to do, but it's what you get from doing those things and what you get from implementing the standard. So yeah, I think the working group did a great job in ensuring that the standard is ambitious but achievable and implementable at the mill and farm level as well.
There are no more questions.
Okay, so please do send your questions. We can give another couple of minutes. But if you don't have any questions, as I said, there is that email, standards@bonsucro.com. If anything comes up, if you feel like there's something you need clarification on, please feel free to send an email to us.
Well, thank you.
Okay, we got a new question. Are any of the environmental performance metrics core in the new standards?
Yes, it's core to have, for example, the biodiversity management plan. Also, I think all the plans are what expected to do. And also something very important is that now with all these risk analysis that we have introduced in the standard, it lets every operation to understand better their context, their own risks and their own challenges, and find out a plan or a way to mitigate them or to treat them in a better way with the best practices. So yes, most of them are cool.
Thank you, Ruth. So we have another question. Can you say a little more about the incorporation of mental health? I didn't see it explicitly mentioned in the new text.
Oh yeah, about mental health, it is included in the guidance. This is incorporated in the health and safety risk assessment.
Okay. Yeah, so I think if I'm not wrong, Ruth and Celine, we have Celine as well, who's our assurance manager on the call. So the requirement is around having the health and safety management plan, and within that, then there is a component on mental health that is described in the guidance document, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is, will you have training for licensed trainers and when? Yes, so we are organizing the training material and we expect that to be ready by March. So I think from March, the training providers, the certification bodies, and the certified mills and farms in general will have access to training. Okay, the next question, are there any rules around deforestation in the new standards? Would you like to cover? I can explain.
You can cover it, Rafael.
Yeah, so we have of course, as I mentioned, the HCV the high conservation value areas as the reference that we use, right? So this includes, of course, forests, natural forests, but also lands of high cultural value, for example, or heritage lands. So this remains, and the indicator that we had before on conversion, so the cutoff, let's say, for natural areas or forests remains the old one, which is, if I'm not wrong, January 2008. If I'm not wrong. And now what was introduced to make it even stronger is a new cutoff date for conversions of farmland into sugarcane that were previously a forest or a natural ecosystem. And this is from 2021. And basically the indicator was introduced based on our members' commitments to no deforestation. So it's very strong. It's actually our cutoff date for the conversion is actually stronger than what you have in European law, for example. Ruth, I don't know if you have any other element to that you want to add.
No, yes, we make it stronger because we included natural ecosystems, so to be sure that there was no indirect deforestation also. So yes, that's for no deforestation.
Yeah, that's a very important component of changes of the standard. Here, have a new question. Are the working group prepared to publish the supporting document during the drafting the new standard so that we can understand the rationale and why it was changed?
Yeah, I think this question is better if Celine answers it. Celine?
Hi, sorry. I think if I understand the drafting of the new standard, yeah, there was some level of sharing done during the drafting of the standard in terms of sharing some of the guidance. Now everything has been published in terms of the full standard, the implementation guidance, the auditing guidance. And some of those guidance are more about ways about implementing the standard, ways about auditing against the standard, but sometimes also clarify the rationale behind the change by explaining a difference in approach. You would have an example, which is the old indicator around obey the law, which has a very kind of strongly worded, uncompromising wording in the old standards, which is now has an approach about a management system, like Raphael was saying, where we're looking at how the operator has a system in place to maintain conformity actively with the law. So it's a more like productive, all-encompassing approach. So those kind of changes are clearly documented in the guidance as well.
Thank you, Celine. Okay, next question. What does it mean identifying risks and opportunities in the wider supply base? What are the requirements of the mill if an issue is identified?
Well, this was part of the interest of many of the members to be sure that the operation do not permit that in the whole supply area where non-conforming operators have limits and they cannot do much things with other growers that they do not own, right? So for this, what we are trying is at least to identify these opportunities and try to approach them. We don't, when we know that it's not going to be like maybe possible to address them directly, but maybe start raising awareness on what, for example, child labor can bring through the communities, or what can happen if they begin using EPP, for example, in some of their chores or something. So this is more to try to raise awareness in the whole supply area. But first we have to identify which are the risks for this which are the risks and where are these located. So that's why we included the whole supply base.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay. So I see we don't have any further questions. Please, does anyone else have a question? Please type into the Q&A function and we'll get to them. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions for the moment. So yeah, I think we will stop here, and thank you again for your time and your participation. The team will continue to be at your disposal if you have questions, or if there are things that you want to discuss. As I mentioned, all the documents, all the information around the transition plan, the transition period as well, is available on our website, and we will be sharing both the recording of the session and the links to the relevant parts of our website with you via email. So that's it. Thank you very much, Ruth and Celine, as well, for your support. And yeah, we're very excited, really looking forward to the implementation of the new standard and to continue working with you. So take care, everyone. Have a great day, evening, or morning, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.